What's that number one misconception you hear when people are thinking about building a business, making money, changing their financial situation?
Yeah.
What's the number one thing you hear and you go, that's the issue?
I think they conflate sequence is probably the first and biggest thing, because a lot of people who are wanting to make money believe that the making money comes from investing, and investing is the last thing you do, not the first thing you do. And so one of the things is they'll look at people who are at the end of their careers and say, okay, well, these guys are making all these, these bets, right? If I just bought this meme coin, or I just bought Bitcoin in 2013, I'd be super rich. But it actually doesn't take into consideration what a decision-making process like that would create, which is if you took a swing at every type of Bitcoin, because you can't just say, I would only pick this one. You'd have to say, I'd pick every single super long shot. It's like, we probably would have lost on 99 of the other bets. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, we have to take it in aggregate. And so I would say making active income cool again, rather than the passive bet and really just gambling, is probably the first thing that people mess up, is that they somehow think that working or active income is not scalable, when in reality, the people who have the most money typically have tremendously high incomes. And it's because of the excess of cash flow from that income are they able now to make big swings with riskier bets that sometimes pay off and sometimes don't. But you can't take those swings unless you have more cash flow that's coming in from the things you do every day.
You know what? No one's ever said it that well, like from everyone I've spoken to. And I'm so glad you pointed it out, because I completely agree. I have so many friends who, when they saw the rise of crypto or whatever it was, jumped in with a large sum of their life savings because they heard of a friend of a friend of a friend who'd made a killing, put it all in there. A week later, it dropped by like 10K. They pulled it all out. Right. The next week, it went up double. And it was just a mess. And so many of them lost like 10, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds, dollars. And it's all because you're thinking that's the way to get there.
Right.
And it's cooler and it's smarter and like you're a genius.
Yeah, right.
And you're right. Actually, everyone I know that's made amazing money on any of that already had tons of money. And it was play money for them.
Yeah.
So it just changed into this. So what's happening there? Why is it that we've been led down this thought process? And how do we get out of it?
I mean, I think it's fundamentally the something for nothing fallacy of like, how can I get rich quick? How can I do it really easily? And basically, the more it feels like luck is usually where you should have your first red flag. I have a belief that if you control all the variables, then you can predict the outcome. Now, we don't always control all the variables in any given situation, but the greater number of variables we control, the greater influence we have over the outcome. And if you're getting into something like this and you're like, I actually don't even know what the variables are, then it's like you are 100% gambling. And so this is your life savings. Would you put it on black at the casino? Probably not. This is really not that different than that. Except at the casino, you have no nods at least. Right here, it's like you have no idea. And typically by the time, especially Gen Pop, kind of retail investors find out about something, it is the peak and it is too late. And so you have to be at the very beginning of these if you want to be speculative, which I wholeheartedly am not a big fan of speculative investments in general, because it's basically the greater fool theory, which is what they call it in the investment world, which is just like we just keep selling to the greater and greater fool until sometimes somebody is the greatest fool of all and then it drops, right? And so I prefer to think about, instead of thinking of investments and active income, I think of it just money per unit of time. And that kind of takes out this binary, or what I would consider a false binary of active and passive. And think, well, and I feel like I can prove this pretty clearly, which is we live in time and we collect money in that period of time. And so fundamentally, all we want to do if we want to increase our income is just think, what are we earning per unit? And this is where, again, bad piece of advice is like, never sell your time. It's like, okay, well, if someone gave you $1 billion for an hour, would you not sell that? I would. Right? And so it's a question of how much is your time worth? And then that creates a much more actionable decision-making framework of, is this worth it or not? And to ladder up to the active versus passive, it's how active is it versus how passive is it? And it's my belief that nothing is passive, because there's always going to be a certain amount of, if you're doing it right, let's say if you made one passive investment, if you're doing it the right way, you probably should have looked at 100 deals, and all of that took time. And all of that takes diligence. And then after doing all this analysis, then you decide to make this investment. And so to say that it's passive, it's like it doesn't take into account all of the research that goes into ahead of time, which is absolutely still work. Now, after the investment, sure, but there's still time that you're trading. By first breaking that idea of like, in order for me to get rich, it must be something that I don't trade my time for, I think is like big myth number one. So if we assume that, then we say, okay, I have to trade my time for money because money comes in over time. What are the things that I can trade my time for that will get me more than I'm currently getting, which is a much more solvable problem that also is significantly less risky. And so, especially when you're trading time, we have some. And so we really just risk the time to be like, I don't want to sell, I'm not a slave. It's like, calm down. It's a voluntary exchange. And here's the thing is, if you don't think the price is worth it, then don't make the trade. And that's one of the beauties of capitalism is it's two parties both saying they'll be better off. And so fundamentally, I would say the focus of the content, the stuff that I put out is how can I equip people with the skills so that when they trade that time, they get more for it and then continue to trade up and up and up for the rest of their careers.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually such counterintuitive advice to what I feel has been spreading on the internet for the last 2 decades of every conversation's around passive income.
Yeah.
I feel like every one of my friends is addicted to figuring out how they can make passive income.
Yeah.
And those are the same people that are not making any more money than they already were.
Yeah.
But it's this addiction and obsession with, if I figure this out, then I can quit my day job and whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I've had influence. So my neighbor is he owns Panda Express. And so last time I checked, they did $3.7 billion in revenue, and they have about a 27% net margin. So he took home $935 million in personal income, not investment, income. And so people see his investment portfolio, which is impressive, as you can imagine, he's been doing it for 45 years. And so that starts to add up, right? But the thing is he can only take these kind of bigger swings or bigger bets because he has this very regular cash flow that he spent 45 years building. Mm-hmm. And I would say that what's interesting is that you can build something very big in about 5 to 7 years. And the problem is that I think most people spend that same 5 to 7 years reliving the same 30 days over and over again, jumping from thing to thing to thing, and never actually getting the root set so that they can pay down their ignorance tax of not knowing enough. Basically, I would say there's 5 stages that most newer entrepreneurs or people who want to pursue income go through. So the first is what I call uninformed optimism. So your friend tells you about this thing they made 10 grand on, and you're like, that sounds amazing. You're uninformed, but you're optimistic, right? And so then you get into it, and then all of a sudden you get to informed pessimism. So you get in and then you put your money in and then it drops and you're like, wow, this sucks. And then, people are like, buy the dip. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to put more money in. And so then you get to kind of stage 3, which is the valley of despair, where you're like, oh my God, I've lost so much money. I have no idea what's going on right now. And at stage 3, there's kind of a fork. And so either people then go, well, my other friend told me about this other thing, and they jump back to step 1 and go to uninformed optimism. And then they funnel through that loop over and over again. Now, to break through that dip, you have to basically get to stage 4, which is informed optimism. So now you understand the rules of the game, you understand the variables at play, and it's not as good as you thought it was, but you at least get it. And so from there, then you can get to achievement, which is the 5th step. But the thing is that you have to stay in that 3rd painful place, because staying in the pain is what gives you the catalyst to learn how to get out of pain. And so rather than trying to pull your parachute, it's like, I have to trudge through this so that it forces me to learn the individual skills, the individual variables that affect this outcome. And that means I might have to take 20 more lashings to finally get it. And then at that point, it starts to tick up. Yeah. And then that's when you start to become more of an expert, more of a master at something.
Yeah, and if you don't sit in that pain, you're going to keep repeating that cycle with something new. So it was crypto, then it was NFTs, then it was whatever else, just keeps going round and round and round.